All right, are we live? We're live, everyone. Welcome to the ARCA Racing Podcast. I'm your host, Colby Evans, aka Startin' Parker here, and we have a fun show for you guys tonight. We are reviewing the ARCA Hell Tour weekend. Yes, arguably the longest weekend for the ARCA teams, probably longer than Daytona, some would say, is finally over. The Hell Tour is over. And we'll be previewing another combo race this weekend. Some of the East competitors are back, so that is going to be fun. But yeah, like I said, the ARCA Hell Tour is finally over. And for a lot of these teams, it went well. And for some of these teams, it did not go so well. And we will be talking about both races. Some very familiar faces in victory lane, as we've seen this season. And, well, is the lack of competition really starting to get noticeable? We're going to talk about all that on today's show. I'm going to go through my little intro you guys are used to at the beginning of every podcast. And we will then jump right into Michigan. That was our first race. So you guys know the drill. Follow me on social media, Startin' Parker on Twitter for all ARCA tweets, random tweets, occasional old photos and video clips. I mean, heck, I just posted a Denny Hamlin crash clip that just got quote tweeted by Keselowski. So I'm doing something right, I guess. But yeah, we're almost to 6,000 followers on there. So go give me a follow there. We're almost to 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. We're less than 50 away. So if you like what you see here on the channel, lick the like button and subscribe. Super chats are open if you'd like to financially support the show. Again, you don't have to send one, but if you want to financially support the show, it would be much appreciated. And go give my friends at the racingexperts.com, the official media partner of this podcast, go give them a look as well, as they are my media partners that I work with at the racetrack sometimes. So what is the ARCA Hell Tour for some of the maybe the new listeners of this podcast, or maybe the new people who watch ARCA? The ARCA Hell Tour kind of started a couple years ago, where they used to have two races in one weekend. Now, when you imagine, even for the Cup Series, when they used to do that during COVID, that's hard on them. But, the Cup Series, they can kind of manage that. Well, for the ARCA Series, where for even some of the bigger teams, it can be a struggle. Having two races in just 3 days, it's asking a lot. And in the early days of this Hell Tour, we used to go to Watkins Glen on Friday, a road course, and then have to be at Springfield on Sunday, the dirt track. Could go two more different racetracks, and you're asking a series like ARCA to go to both of them. Some people forcing to use the same car, having to change out gearing and put a different setup in, and some of the higher budget teams who were thankfully able to have a second car on standby. So it was a mess, and I kind of called it out for the first couple of years. I really didn't think it was the best call. And then thankfully last year it changed. Instead of Watkins Glen to Springfield, it was then Michigan to then Springfield on Sunday, which is way more manageable for these teams. Now, it's still a long haul, probably a good 6-7 hours, but it's a way easier haul for the teams to just go from there up to go from Michigan south. I mean, go basically straight down south to Springfield, Illinois. A lot easier haul, better for the teams. But it's still a lot. It's still a lot to ask for these organizations to do two races in 3 weekends, two races in 3 days. Yeah. So, but we started off with Michigan. Michigan, again, one of my favorite tracks, just because I'm a high speed guy. I love high speeds. That's why I wish the IndyCar series would come back to Michigan. I know we're beating a dead horse with that one, but fingers crossed one day we'll see IndyCar back at Michigan again. But we had a good field size for this race, the biggest field size since 2018, so that was a plus. We were going to have a couple of starting parks in the field like I had predicted, but still, we were still going to have a bigger field. And anytime we have more bodies on track, it is a bonus. Now, coming into this race, we had a couple of new factors. We had Tanner Grayback, who had recently won Charlotte a couple months ago. Connor Zilisch, who had just turned 18. About a month ago, I think just about a month ago, he turned 18 years old. So he's now eligible to run big tracks. So this was going to be his first start. We had the return of Jake Finch, Jason Kitzmiller, Jeff McZink, a local Michigan native. So it was good to see him back. Andy J was back after, unfortunately, the full-time money not working out. So we had to go back to his part-time schedule. We had Tim Richmond back in his own operation with his father. So we had a couple of new faces return and some familiar faces come back. So that was good to see. We did have one change. Con Nicolopoulos was originally listed in the 06, but it then changed to Nate Muller. So they became a starting park, which sucks. I like to see Con at the track always, so I wonder what went on. But yeah, I was definitely curious on how Connor Zilisch would perform. We know the Pinnacle Racing Group can put together a great car. Obviously, that's not any new slots right there. So yeah, it was just a matter of how would Connor Zilisch perform on his very first big track race, and that was my biggest question. You know, how would he perform? I didn't think he'd win like he did. Spoiler alert, he won. But I didn't think Connor Zilisch was going to win or do as well. I figured maybe he'd run like a third or a fourth, but man, this kid really is the real deal. We say a lot about a lot of these young talents that they are the real deal, man. Connor Zilisch, man, he's just one of them. He's one of those kids, man. You know, like he just got it at a young age, and it shows. And it's great to see, man, because there's a lot of these kids, you know, I feel like who get rushed way too quickly, and they only reach their prime kind of towards the end of their career. Then you got these rare drivers who just get it. Racecraft, you know, the ability to change grooves, the ability to just conserve tire. They have every part of it nailed down. And that's honestly what I see out of Connor Zilisch. Any kind of track you put him on. Personally, I wish he would have ran the dirt races just to see how good this guy's on dirt. It's kind of weird that they didn't run with Corey Day either, since he's a dirt guy. So, but yeah, unfortunately, shocker, it rained. I mean, rain at a racetrack, when has that ever happened? So we didn't get qualifying in, which was, I figured we wouldn't. But at least we got some track time. 2 cars did not make a lap. One of them was Tony Bridinger, and I don't remember the other one off the top of my head. I also forgot to mention Frankie Muniz was in this race. His return to ARCA as well in the Rayom 33 car. I forgot to mention that as well. But 2 cars did make a practice run. I believe it was the 80. No, the 86 was not at this race, but it was the 25 and one other car. If anyone can quickly help me, it was a 25 and someone else that didn't take a practice lap, so they were at a disadvantage already. Andres Perez de Lara, like I had predicted, was going to be tough to beat because, remember, we talked in the preview show last week. He had the best car, in my opinion, in this race last year, and he should have won the race last year. The only reason why Andres did not win this race last year was simply he lost an engine. Had he not lost an engine, he would have won this race. So him placing first in practice was not a shocker. Gus Dean, second, again, not a shocker. Years of experience. He's ran this track many times in ARCA and the Truck Series, so he's got plenty of experience. By the way, shout out to Gus Dean making his Xfinity debut tomorrow for AM Racing in the 15. Good luck to him. He's a decent plate racer. Won Daytona earlier this year, so just wanted to give him a shout out for that. Like I said, Connor Zilisch, it didn't take him long. You know, I mean, he was 3rd quickest on the practice charts. Tanner Gray down 4th. Andy J, 5th. Chris Wright 6th. Greg Van Al 7th. Jake Finch, again, just honestly, in my opinion, has just not really been running as good as I feel like the 20 car should be running. LeVar Scott, he was actually my pick to win the race. He was down in 9th, and Amber Balkin was down in 10th. Like I said, they did not have qualifying due to the rain. So they started. Did they start on practice speed? So they basically started on practice speeds, which again makes sense. Say it was Tony Bridinger and looking at the start. Oh, it was Alex Clubb and Tony that did not take a practice lap. Okay. So those were the 2 cars that did not take a practice lap. So the race got going. Thankfully, it looked like it was going to be a complete washout. The radar did not look good. There were actually plans. I was talking to Charlie Crawl, who's one of the PR directors for ARCA, and there were some worried moments there, man. We were wondering when if we were going to get the race in, were we just going to run to lap 35? They had determined that if the ARCA race had been able to get to lap 35, that would be deemed good enough. Because like I said, there was no room for, error. We could not really afford to wait till Saturday to run this race. We had to get it in. Thankfully, for once, Mother Nature actually came through for us. And not only were we able to get, 35 laps in, we're actually able to get the entire race in with no weather holdups whatsoever. So, race got going green. Andres got a big shove to the lead out by Connor Zilisch. Early in the race, we did have some trouble with some back markers. Nate Muller, the car kind of struggled for speed, wasn't really sure what happened to him, but he could just never seem to run a lap at speed. I think his fastest lap was like a 50-second lap. And while Nate has never been on a big track before, outside of the Daytona test, he's not been in a big track in a real race. I wonder if something was wrong with just the car, because it's like he could never be able to make a lap at speed. And I think I had to assume he was parked because he was simply going too slow. Casey Carden, they had a mechanical problem after 6 laps, so I hate that for Rise Motorsports. Casey, he doesn't run many races. He's part-time. So this was a good opportunity for him, and his race was also over early in 6 laps due to a mechanical problem. So after 6 laps, we were already down to 2 cars. I figured we were going to have a couple of cars drop out of the race early. So I just wanted to give updates on those immediately. But Andres was able to get a big lead. Connor was battling for second with Dean. Kind of like what usually we see with these Michigan races, about 15 cars can kind of keep up, and then they kind of start dropping one by one, kind of like a pack race at Talladega where, once the cars that have a really good handling setup at a track like this, then they will start to pull away as the long run goes. Does that make sense? Kind of as the run gets on, the field gets thinner and thinner and thinner. That's just kind of what happens at these big track ARCA races, and that's kind of what happened back in the day. That's what's happened back in the day with ARCA, trucks, Xfinity, and Cup. That's just what happens at these big tracks. Is the cars that have the better handling setups, obviously, yeah, they got better motors, but a good setup will take you a long way. So, obviously, with Michigan here, lap traffic was a factor. They caught the back of the field very quickly. Again, like we've discussed before, some teams do not have the motor budget that the 28, the 18, Rev, Venturini, they don't have the motor budget that those teams have. Sometimes they have to run motors 4 or 5 races at a time, whereas, the top teams are sometimes flipping motors every race. And, unfortunately, at a track like Michigan, it shows. It really does show because, Andy's guys, they're giving their Andy Hillenberg's cars, like to mention, they're giving their cars everything they got out there, but yet they're still a second and a half off. Even though those guys are driving as hard as they could. I was talking to Cody Dennison. He had a blast out there in the 11 car, and he was giving it everything he had. But that's just all the car had in it. It's not a knock against the team. It's just the truth. They're giving it everything they got, but because their motors aren't as snuff as the 18 and the 28, that's just all they can do. And that goes the same for teams, for like them, like Club, like Tim Richmond's team, the 31, 31 who runs an SB2, Brad who runs an SB2, they're even worse off because they have horsepower penalties because they have a bigger plate. So it's just a matter of, how fresh your motor is when it comes to a track like Michigan, is how competitive you can be. And it shows. It does show. It's not a knack against any operation. These guys all bust their freaking asses. But it's just kind of how it is. Early in the race, though, it was shown, going back to the race, it was shown, though, that Andres Perez de Lara definitely was not the dominant and quick car that he was last year. He got caught by Connor Zilisch pretty quickly. Connor Zilisch nearly wrecked himself, made a very classic rookie mistake, I would say, when he tried to take the lead on lap 7. Went into turn 3 way too hard underneath Andres and nearly wrecked himself. I'd say kind of a classic rookie mistake that we've seen. And even veterans have made that same mistake as well. Seen that same mistake as well, but luckily it's saved. Andres was able to hold the lead for a couple more laps until Connor was able to take over the lead at the end of lap 7 and would lead for a couple of laps until the 18, which took a while to come in. Eventually, that car, I feel like the long run speed of that 18 car is what makes it so hard to beat. And That car would take the lead on lap 23. At this point, we were lapping cars pretty good. They had lapped up to all the fast track cars, Christian Rose, some of the other Venturini entries. Poor LeVar Scott, man, his luck, just when it seems like his luck is about to turn around, something bad happens. And you could really say this run mixed with his poor Talladega finish, which again, both of them were not his fault, have resulted in, unfortunately, him dropping down in the championship order. But I believe it was a flat tire. It was a left front flat, or I think it was a front flat tire, which unfortunately caused damage to the front valence. And so he had to pit like, 3 or 4 times. Did he have a 2-lap penalty? I know there were a couple of cars in the field that had 2-lap fueling penalties, which I can understand to an extent, but I think, in my opinion, that's also a little bit stupid. But we had LeVar pit what felt like 10,000 times. And unfortunately for LeVar Scott, he finished the race 11 laps down. It just killed whatever of a good finish the guy had. So he was my pick to win, which sucks because I thought he had the speed to win. He actually was running good. He was running like top 5, top 6 speeds. He probably would have had a top 10 finish, but unfortunately, issues there. Frankie Muniz, unfortunately, his race was kind of over before it could get going too, which kind of explains Frankie's entire ARCA career. The guy every time he seems to have something going good for him, something went wrong. The car was just down on power. It said they think they had a plug wire loose or some sort of spark plug issue, was reported on the TV broadcast. It did appear that his car came back to him in the second run of the race because he was definitely, he was running close to a second a lap faster in the second run of the race. So, but the part he already went so many laps down early in the race that, poor Frankie didn't even have a chance to be competitive, which sucks because anytime Frankie's in the field, we all want to cheer for him. We all want to see Frankie do well, especially after what was a dismal last year. I want to see Frankie do well, and it just feels like every time something good's going for him, something goes wrong. So no real crashes. We were at our first competition break at lap 35. At this point, we had no DNFs or due to crash damage. Like I said, the 06 was out. The 31 was out. The 27 of Tim Richmond, poor Tim Richmond. It was good to see them back, but they had a 2-lap fueling penalty under green. Apparently, you can't fuel under green, 2-lap penalty. And then reports came from some nice folks who were at the ARCA race that the 27's engine sounded terrible. And it was sounding worse and worse and worse. And eventually it sounds like Tim just retired the car after 30 laps. Because obviously they need that motor. They need the car. They don't want to tear anything up. So that was unfortunately the end of Tim Richmond's day. But going back green on the next race break, we still had 21 of our 24 starters still running. And like the same before, the 18, this is when the 18 really got into its element. Pulled away from the field. Connor Zilisch could kind of hang with him, but at the same time, the 18 was just able to maintain a steady gap, and they just, again, pulled away from everybody. It's amazing when you can see 2 cars pull away, at a 1 mile short track or 1 mile on a short track. But when you see 2 cars like that pull away at a track like Michigan, really, again, just shows how much more dialed up those cars are. It's amazing how much better those cars are. It really is. And I can respect it in a way. Ingenuity in this sport, man. You just don't see that in 2024. I can respect it in a way. Unfortunately, it was in the second run where we had a couple more cars drop out. Brad Smith, who had intended to run the full race and even actually ran some pretty decent lap times for an SB2 motor and for Brad himself. The motor was getting too hot. He didn't want to blow it up because, again, it's his only motor right now. It is his only motor right now. So Brad retired after 44 laps. We had our next mechanical issue. Next break at lap 70. I'm just going to fast forward to lap 70 because Tanner Gray led all the way through that break with not all that much happened in that second break. Everyone kind of stayed where they were. There was some mid-pack battles, but everyone just kind of stayed where they were in that run. However, things picked up after that that second break. Coming to the restart, Connor Zilisch got a great run despite the 18 getting a push from the 20. The 15 then rocketed to the 20, gave him a push. The 20 tried to go to the outside, broke the 18's momentum, and the 28 of Connor Zilisch shot into the lead. And you could say that was all it needed. The 18 had a really rough restart. I mean, the 18 literally went from first to, I think, sixth, seventh. And unfortunately, when you get that far back at a track like Michigan, now he caught back up quickly, but when you get that far back, you could say, had that not happened, he probably would have had the race, if not had a good chance at the race. But Zilisch, he just continued to pull away. I mean, again, that car was hooked up. Greg Van Alst even shockingly shot up to second at one point. It was really good to see a Ford. And you got to remember, Greg Van Alst does not have any manufacturer support from Ford. So him running that good just goes to show you, man, he's good. Just wish he had the money more money to be up front every week, like running every week. Unfortunately, Greg has. We'll get to Greg Van Alst in a second, but Greg Van Alst will not be competing full time in the remainder of the season after skipping Springfield. But we had a good three-way battle, though, for the end, I thought. Really solid battling between the 28, the 2, and the 18. And it came down to the dreaded aero blocking. A lot of people who have been complaining about aero blocking in NASCAR and not ARCA, but trucks and Xfinity. I feel like this was a classic case that we saw here. The 18 looked like he was running the top 2 down, but Tanner Gray eventually hit the wall. Not hard, but he hit the wall probably enough where the car probably wasn't right after that. And he could hang with them, but he couldn't keep up with them anymore. So it was really down to Perez, Andres Perez de Lara, and Connor Zilisch. And if I'm a betting man, I think the 2 car was faster. But Connor Zilisch, man, to his credit, for a guy who had never been at Michigan before, he did a perfect job of running the lane. The fastest lane you can run around Michigan is what the 28 was running. And in ARCA, with how much you have to draft these cars, there was just nothing that Zilisch could or Perez could do. There was really nothing he could do. He would try running the high line, he'd lose ground. He tried running an even lower exit. It really wouldn't work very good for him. He could get close, but it just, like I said, no cigar. And it was just kind of like that, lap after lap after lap. And then eventually coming to the white flag, Andres missed the final corner just by a little bit, and that opened up the gap to about a second. And at that point, it was over. And Connor Zilisch, man, very impressive. Connor Zilisch wins at Michigan. An unbelievable season that this kid is having. Like I said, he's going to be at JRM full-time next year. Great place for him. It's his 4th win of the season in the main division. 4th win of the season in the main division. I think, 5th overall if you count Flat Rock. I think 5th overall if you count Flat Rock. So, yeah, the guy's just having a beautiful season. I mean, I'm so proud of this kid. I mean, when I was 18, I was doing crew gigs. And this kid's 18, and he's winning everything. And when you win as much as he does, you got the ability to brag. So he won the race. Andres Perez de Lara was 2nd. Tanner Gray was 3rd. Jake Finch made it to 4th. Chris Wright 5th. Greg Van Alst 6th. Jason Kitzmiller actually ended up with a halfway decent finish in 7th. Tony Breininger 8th. Christian Rose 9th, and Amber Balkin was 10th. Cody Dennison, man, just outside of the top 10 in 11th. Frankie Muniz 12th. Jason Alexander 13th. Gus Dean in the later part of that run fell down to 14th. I believe he had a couple of fueling penalties as well. 2-lap fueling penalties. That car was just off the whole race, it felt like. LeVar Scott, he only recovered to 15th. Ryan Roulette had some mechanical problems with his car, so he could only nurse it to 16th. Jeff Magzink, he had issues with his motor too. He limped it home 17th, and Alex Clubb was 18th. Fortunately for Andy J, mechanical problems put an end to his day in 18th, or 19th, I should say. Michael Maples, also mechanical problems, ended his day in 20th. So 18 of the 24 cars finished the race. I thought it was a good race. Did not expect the 28 to be that dominant. Again, I wish the Rev cars would have won. I wish we could have gotten a full-time regular in victory lane, because the discussion has been a lot this year. Will a full-time regular driver win? And, a lot of us had predicted that Michigan would probably be the place where it was going to happen, with Rev winning. And they came close, but still no cigar. And we are now 13. Well, spoiler alert, we're now 14 races in, because they didn't win on Sunday either. Zilisch won. We are 14 races into the season now, and we have still yet to have a full-time regular season driver win. And like I've kept saying on this podcast for the last couple of races, in my personal opinion, Andres Perez de Lara needs to win at least one race to help legitimize his championship. Because if he's going to win the Drivers' Championship and not win one race, where you have all these other young kids having this great success, only being held back because they're not 18, with all due respect to me, that's not the best look. He's got to win at least one race. He's had some good races, but he hasn't won. I'm sorry, but in my opinion, he's got to win at least one to help legitimize his championship win. Again, I'm not sure how you guys feel about that, but for me, that's how you got to legitimize your championship win, man. You got to win races. Consistency is good. Consistency is good, yes. But in a series like this with lower car counts, man, sometimes consistency doesn't look as good. Running fifth every week in a field of 40 cars is fine. Running fifth every week in a field of about 20 cars to 25 cars, not so much. It's okay, but when you're trying to be a full-time championship contender, it can go both ways. So that was ARCA Michigan. It was okay. I thought personally the last 2 years were better. Last year's race I thought was a lot better. 2022 I thought was better. Not bad I would say, but not the best Michigan race, honestly. But Connor Zilisch, man, kid's a superstar. I'm excited for next year's ARCA Michigan race. I'm sure it'll be fun, but yeah, not the best one, but we've seen worse. We've seen worse. So I wouldn't lump this in with a bad race. I would not lump it in as a bad race. I would just say, okay race. I'd give it a 6 out of 10, 6.5, being honest with you. Nothing to write home about, but, your standard ARCA race in Michigan, I thought it was okay. Just that's probably the best they'll put it. So